Welcome to the Twin City Sports Talk podcast. Here we will discuss the world of Minnesota sports as well as go over news from the rest of the NFL, NHL, MLB, and NBA. This wonderful show is run by two idiots with a microphone that we probably should not have, but we do, so your ears can be blessed with this absolute gem of a podcast each and every week. I'm your host, Nikolai, and even though I love Minnesota sports, I live in New England, so I am forced to do this show with one of the most insufferable types of humans on this planet, a Boston sports fan. Daniel, say hi to the listeners.
How y'all doing? How y'all doing?
Today, we're going to recap the Vikings' pathetic win over the Jacksonville Jaguars, as well as go over some NFL playoff scenarios and a preview of the Vikings' upcoming game against Tampa Bay. After that, we'll move on to the NBA, go over the newly released first half schedule, and give our thoughts on the upcoming season, including what the Timberwolves might do this year. We'll then give you our rankings of the best young studs in Minnesota sports right now, as well as go over the latest free agency news, and lastly, give you our weekly picks. All right, let's get into it. Starting with the Vikings OT win over the Jags on Sunday. They got off to a bad start, down 9-0 in the first, due in large part to Eric Kendrick's absence and this fluky touchdown pass from Mike Glennon to Laviska Shenault. Starting in the second, the Vikings began to show signs of life, and by the third quarter, they were rolling. Unfortunately, special teams were a problem yet again. 2 missed PATs and a missed field goal at the end of regulation to send the game into overtime, where Dan Bailey put the misses behind him and put the game away from 23 yards out. Justin Jefferson had another great game, 9 catches on 12 targets for $121 and a touchdown. Daniel, has Justin Jefferson really put himself into that Rookie of the Year conversation along with Justin Herbert?
Yeah. We saw how Justin Herbert played last week to a relatively mediocre New England defense, and it was not pretty. Uh, I definitely think that he's probably one of the top 5 receivers right now for a rookie, which is very impressive. So I would definitely say he's up there. I mean, he has the numbers. I saw someone on Instagram try to compare him to Randy Moss. I do not think he's there yet, but he's definitely a very talented guy. I think he's personally better than Adam Thielen. I know that's going to get a lot of people butthurt, but I think that's true. I think within like a couple of years, he's definitely going to evolve into one of the better receivers in the league. And overall, yes, I do believe that he is in the conversation.
I agree with you on that Thielen point. I think Jefferson is the number one receiver on the Vikings. And to your Moss point, I don't think he's Randy Moss. Randy Moss changed the game of football, but his numbers are very similar to Randy Moss's through these 12 or 13 games now so far. No, 12 games. We had a bye week. My bad. But yeah, I do think Justin Jefferson, he's easily the best rookie wide receiver in my opinion. And if Herbert continues to lose and Jefferson's able to help the Vikings make it into the playoffs, I think he's a lock for Rookie of the Year.
I
Uh,
agree with that. I feel like he fills in the role that Stephon Diggs had before he departed, and I definitely think that he's like just super talented. He's a better route runner than Diggs, in my opinion. He just needs to work on, just getting a little bit more open. I mean, his route running skills are pretty good. He's very quick. I just think that Diggs is right now the better player, but in the next couple of years, I think he'll get far better.
Yeah, I don't understand why the Vikings don't target him more. I mean, he's a burner on the outside, and that one throw towards the end of the game to Thielen that wound up being incomplete, that should have gone to Jefferson. Thielen is not the guy there. Thielen's your short to mid-range guy, possession catch. But Jefferson, he can get those deep balls. He can get those sideline routes, and I just don't understand why they don't do more of those plays.
Yeah, he is their speed receiver for sure. I mean, Thielen is really good running, flat routes or like just kind of going right off the line of the scrimmage and then just running very quick short routes. That's what he specializes in. He's like I wouldn't say a clock management kind of guy where he like gets out of bounds on every play, but he's definitely not, your deep threat. That's definitely Justin Jefferson for sure.
No, and Thielen's more of a third and fourth down type of guy. And sticking
Yeah.
with the rookies here, this time on the defensive side of the ball, Cameron Dantzler had his breakout game, targeted 7 times, only allowing 1 catch for 7 yards. Also got a pick and a forced fumble along with that recovery on the 1 catch he allowed. Can Dantzler and the Vikings defense continue the success they've had since the bye week? Because they have been on fire since their abysmal start to the year.
Yeah, I mean, when they started the year, they were absolutely god awful. I wouldn't say they were Cowboys level, and this is from a Cowboys fan, but they were bad, and it was ugly football they were playing. Throughout the bye, like since the bye week, they've been playing a lot better, much more consistent. I think they need another corner to complement him. Uh, But their issue right now is that their secondary is just so weak. But I do think that they can get better. They're getting a little bit more pressure on the line, which is always a positive. They're keeping the quarterback inside the pocket, which they need to do. I definitely think that they can continue their trail upwards. I think they're just going to be a bit more inconsistent against these better teams like Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I mean Tampa Bay. If Tom Brady's able to connect on the deep balls, which he hasn't
If
these past few weeks, they
if
are the Vikings are the ideal matchup for them. I mean Tampa. I mean they're going to target the corners, and the Vikings really do need to have like a high safety up there to protect the corners because they are rookies. They're young, and going up against a veteran, one of the best quarterbacks in NFL history, you're going to have a tough time against that. But going forward, I mean, Chicago, Detroit, you can definitely do well against them. Zimmer game plans well for New Orleans, so I think they can do that well too. And obviously, next year, you're going to get Daniil Hunter back. You're going to get Michael Pierce back. Anthony Barr, if he's still a Viking, he'll be back. So they're definitely going to improve as time goes on. And moving on to the third side of the football, special teams, the Vikings special teams have been just terrible all year, most glaringly since that bye week. I mean, missed kicks, blocked and muffs punts, you name it. Are the Vikings able to completely fix these problems this late into the season?
Absolutely not. A team like the Vikings, where they've had special team problems, that's very similar, at least I would say, is the Chargers. And you saw on Sunday how they were absolutely killed by New England in terms of the special team side of the ball. Of course, you had the touchdown, the kick return, and then of course the block. I forget who it was, but Devin McCourty ran it back for the touchdown. Um, I do not believe that Minnesota has the ability to change that. I don't think that they can get a better kicker right now. There's not too many kickers that are in free agency that I think can, fill that spot. I just think that, you just kind of deal with it till the end of the year to like either draft someone or pick it up in the free agency.
I mean, I agree. I think the best option for the Vikings right now would be to fire their special teams coordinator, Marlon Maloof. But Dan Bailey's been solid, not solid. He's been serviceable all year. This week was terrible for him. Not common for Bailey, but they do need a returner. I think signing one of the free agents out there would be extremely beneficial for them. Osborne has not worked out. BB isn't the guy back there, but they really do need to sort that out if they want to get into the playoffs. That being said, even though the win wasn't pretty over Jacksonville, the Cardinals did lose to the Rams, meaning the Vikings slide right into that new 7 seed in the NFC. And after the Niners lost to Buffalo on Monday night, the Vikings playoff odds jumped to 40%, and the Cardinals, who are currently chasing Minnesota, have a 37% chance to make the playoffs. The Vikings have 2 games left against winning opponents, those being next week in Tampa against the sliding Buccaneers, and then Christmas Day in New Orleans against the Taysom Hill-led Saints. I would assume. I don't think Drew Brees can recover that quickly from 12 fractured ribs and a collapsed lung. But the Cardinals, on the other hand, they only play one winning team the rest of the way, that being the Rams in LA in the final week of the regular season. And if you're the Vikings, you have to focus on beating out Arizona and assuming that you beat out the other teams in the hunt, like the Niners, and somehow the Lions and the Bears are still in the mix. All that being said, do the Vikings have what it takes to make the playoffs?
Overall, yes, the talent is there. You look at a similar team like Cleveland, where they have roughly the same amount of talent. I think that Cleveland is better on the defensive side of the ball. Overall, at least, they have a stronger secondary, and of course, they have an excellent edge rusher in Myles Garrett. I do believe that they have the chance to make the playoffs, especially with the fact that Arizona is slipping. I mean, they lost to New England. We suck. And then they lost, of course, to the Rams. So I don't think that I think Kyler Murray is still learning the offense. I think he's a little bit banged up still. I don't think Cliff Kingsbury, is prepared to make a playoff run. So no, I do not think that Arizona is going to make the playoffs. So I would take Minnesota. They just need to stay consistent and can't make like big game mistakes like they did against Jacksonville.
I'd agree with that. I mean, if it wasn't for that Hail Mary against Buffalo, Arizona would be on a 5-game losing streak right now. On the other hand, the Vikings trending in the complete opposite direction. They should be 6-0 if that wasn't for that terrible game against Dallas that we're not going to talk about. Um, but I mean, the Vikings going up, Cardinals going down. If the Vikings beat Tampa Bay next week, they slide right up past them in the standings. So if that happens, the Vikings are almost locks to make the playoffs at that point, especially if the Cardinals somehow lose again, which don't think they will. They play New York, but things should look good going forward for the Vikings. And all of that starts on Sunday against Tampa Bay. And Tampa Bay off a bye, currently on a 2-game losing streak, and they have lost 3 out of 4 since their 6-2 start. Obviously, there were too many mistakes against the Jaguars for the Vikings, and those need to be cleaned up if the Vikings want to win on Sunday. But Eric Kendricks should be back, which would help the Vikings defense immensely. And in the past, Mike Zimmer has game planned extremely well against top tier quarterbacks. Russell Wilson earlier this season and Aaron Rodgers in that second Packers game. And even then, you have Drew Brees last year in the wild card round of the playoffs. Tom Brady isn't the best guy to run Bruce Arians' offense, at least not the current Tom Brady. A few years ago, definitely, but he can't throw the deep ball, and that's what Arians' offense is based off, and that's shown in the past few weeks. And I think Zimmer will be able to put together an effective defense against Tampa. That being said, what do the Vikings need to do to win this game and to keep their season alive?
Before I answer that question, I just want to bring up the fact that it is not Tom Brady's fault that the fact that Tampa Bay is not having success. That is entirely on Bruce Arians being one, too hard on Tom Brady, two, having a single playoff win in his career and expecting the team to be perfect. With the amount of talent on that roster, I get it. But Bruce Arians is not the guy. He does not know what he's doing. I don't think he's a good head coach.
He's not a good fit with Brady. I mean, he's doing his thing, running his offense with the deep ball and everything, and it's just not working with Brady. He's aging. He doesn't have the same arm strength that he once did. And hopefully that works out to the Vikings' benefit on Sunday, because Brady's locked onto that deep ball. The Vikings are toast.
I agree with that, but the one problem is the fact that Arians is not adjusting to the quarterback he has. Tom Brady still has the accuracy. The problem is he doesn't have the arm. If Tampa Bay can figure out how to adapt to the quarterback they have, because Tom is still a very talented guy. Like, he is probably the best quarterback in the NFL for reading coverages. No one else can do it. Maybe Aaron Rodgers, maybe Drew Brees can read it. But overall, he's still the most consistent of the three of them. I think that Tampa Bay is the better team. There's so much talent on that offense side of the ball. You need to stop Ronald Jones. You need to stop Leonard Fournette. But most importantly, you need to cover Mike Evans. I mean, I think he's their number one threat right now. And I think that Harrison Smith can probably, assist with one of the corners to help them cover. But if Mike Evans is open, Tom Brady will force the ball to him. And if that deep ball's there, I see the Vikings losing.
Oh, completely. I mean, to beat Brady, at least in the past, you need to pressure him, you need to hit him, and you need to make him feel that rush and make him nervous in that pocket, because if he has a clean pocket, that's where he excels. So you need to run different blitz packages that they aren't expecting. And then you also need to have like a Harrison Smith in like single high coverage, or maybe Anthony Harris as well, to assist those rookie cornerbacks, because if you leave those guys alone stranded with Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Antonio Brown, you are done.
Quite frankly, I took Antonio Brown out of the question. I don't see Antonio Brown doing too much, but I mean, the problem with that is that he draws coverage regardless. So he's going to take one of the corners off of Mike Evans, off of Chris Godwin, your two best targets, in my opinion. And that would leave you in single coverage. So
Tom Brady hasn't seen Antonio Brown with 12 yards separation against Chris Boyd yet.
You're not wrong. You are not wrong.
All right, so moving on now to the NBA. The schedule for the first half of the season was released last week, and the Wolves start off with a brutal stretch of games. They start off with what should be an easy one on the 23rd at home against Detroit, but then in Utah, in LA for the Lakers, and then staying there again for the Clippers. After that, the Wolves come back to Minnesota to play Washington, who should be better than last year with the addition of Russell Westbrook. And then a home and home starting in Denver, coming back to Minnesota. And then after all that, they stay there to play the Blazers. That first stretch of 8 games is absolutely miserable. From there, the schedule lightens up. But that stretch there at the beginning is just terrible. If you can come through that stretch at 500 or better, that would be incredible and set you up nicely for the rest of the year. But quite frankly, I just don't see that happening. Now, I hope I'm wrong here, but Daniel, how do you see that first stretch of games unfolding record-wise?
I think you're just spot on with the 500. I don't see them winning too many games. That schedule is just arguably the worst in the NBA to start off. I don't think that they win to either Denver or the Blazers. I just think they're significantly better teams. They stand a chance against the majority of the others, but I just don't see them closing through, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm thinking realistic. This might be a tad optimistic, but probably around the 3-5 range with wins against Detroit. Better beat them. Washington and probably one of those against the Nuggets or the Blazers. Nuggets being in Minnesota. I don't think they win in Denver. But optimistic, I think extremely optimistic would be 4-4. They're going to lose to the both the LA teams. I think they're going to lose to Utah, and then you have one other game against Portland or Denver there that you could lose as well.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that, to be completely honest with you. I agree with pretty much everything you said. Maybe switch up the loss and the win between Denver um, and the Blazers, but otherwise, I think you're pretty much spot on. They start, 3-5.
Yeah. So moving past that brutal stretch of early games, let's explore how the teams in the West might finish the season. We all know that the Western Conference is loaded this year, but the NBA did add a play-in round for the 10 through 7 seeds. Obviously, you have the Lakers, Nuggets, and Clippers toward the top, but who do you see in that 7 to 10 range, and who do the Wolves need to beat out to get in?
Honestly, my top two picks right now, at least, are Dallas. That roster has potential. They eliminated the Clippers, I believe, last year, which were absolutely stacked. And then I have New Orleans, which there is so much talent on that, young talent on that team. I mean, if Zion can, not stay injured for once in his career, they have a really good chance of making the playoffs. And then I see the Suns with Chris Paul just for that third spot in the hunt.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Golden State's also in the mix for that. I don't know how Clay's injury is going to affect that. They started 1-2 and were losing Sacramento before Steph Curry got hurt. So not sure how they're going to overcome that. Obviously, they are better than they were last year without Clay. They have Wiseman. They have some other pieces there. But the Wolves do have a chance to compete. I think Memphis is also in that mix. But you really do have to focus on beating out Memphis, Golden State, and New Orleans. I think I have Dallas doing a lot better than you think. I think Houston's going to be a little lower now that the turmoil's there with James Harden. Now that Westbrook's out of town, they even have a new coach, so that's going to take some learning time, especially with the shortened off season. But I think Houston, Phoenix are towards the upper tier of those play-in teams, and the Wolves really do need to focus on New Orleans, Memphis, and Golden State to get into the dance.
I think you're pretty much spot on with that. I'm not gonna give too much credit to Golden State right now. Their roster needs to stay healthy. You brought up Klay Thompson. Klay Thompson has had his injuries. Steph Curry has had his injuries, of course, with the wrist last year, I believe. Golden State, they're not a bad team. I just think they need to stay healthy, and they do stand a shot. But since they lost KD, they have just not been the same.
Yeah, I agree with that. And so moving away from basketball here, let's get into one of two segments today. Don't know what to call this yet, but we'll get there as time moves on. Who are your top 5 Minnesota athletes aged 25 or under right now?
That's a very specific age. Of course, I have number one being Dalvin Cook. I think he is probably the best player on that Vikings roster. Either him or Justin Jefferson, I'd say, are probably 1 and 2. So there's my second pick, Justin Jefferson. I think he's probably their best receiver right now. Dalvin Cook, of course, taking the league by storm, other than Derrick Henry, who I think is the better running back, but that's just me being biased. Um, I think that Dalvin can catch balls out of the backfield a little bit better than Derrick Henry can. I think he's faster than Derrick Henry. He's smaller than Derrick Henry significantly. I think he's more elusive than him as well. Derrick Henry's a very he works a lot better in the open field versus Dalvin can break off of tackles and then just sprint straight down the field. He's a very downfield runner. So I would have him number one. I would have number two being Justin Jefferson, as I said a second ago. I think he's the Vikings' best receiver, and arguably is the hot take. Arguably the best receiver in the NFC North, other than Devontae Adams. I think is the only person that really stands a shot. Maybe Alvin Robinson, but I still think that Justin Jefferson is one of the better receivers in that division for sure. 3, I would have as Karl Anthony Towns, of course, being a top 3 center in the NBA. I think he's a phenomenal talent. 4, I would have as D'Angelo Russell, phenomenal player. He's just been very consistent in the NBA so far. And then in at number 5, I have Luis Arias, the solid hitter for the Twins, and he's got a great eye at the plate and fields pretty well. He's young, and he did have a couple of issues last year, regressed just a little bit, but I have him last on the list simply for that issue alone.
For my list, I'm going to start off with Dalvin Cook. He is the heartbeat of that Vikings offense, and up until these last 2 weeks, Kirk Cousins could not perform unless Cook was on the field. He leads the NFL in scrimmage yards and total touchdowns. I think he's a clear number one on this list. He's 25 years old right now, so a little bit wouldn't be on this list, but right now, definitely number one. And number 2, I have Karl Anthony Towns. He is that number one guy on the Timberwolves. For my money, a top 3 center in the NBA. His defense could use some work, and that's what's holding him back from being that true number one guy in the Wolves, from being that true number one guy in that upper echelon of guys in the NBA, like the LeBron James of the world, the Kawhi Leonards of the world. And that's also what's holding him back from being number one on this list. And at 3, I have D'Angelo Russell. I think he has all the talent in the world, the dynamic scorer, but again, the defense could use some work, and he just isn't cat right now, and that's why I have him 3rd. My 4 spot may have been a bit surprising a few weeks ago, but definitely not anymore. I have Justin Jefferson here. He has been an absolute stud for the Vikings this year, and arguably better than Stephon Diggs, who went to Buffalo. Diggs has 2 fewer yards so far and 3 fewer touchdowns than Jefferson, but he has a huge 37 more targets. And Jefferson's production, especially compared to Diggs, is why I have him at 4. And for the final spot on my rankings, I have Kevin Fiala. The only reason I have him behind Jefferson and why I have Jefferson so low is because both of them, I don't know if they can keep up their production. I have more faith in Justin right now for that. That's why I have him above Kevin. But obviously, Kevin Fiala was a great scorer last year. He just have to prove that he's here to stay, and that's why he's at 5th for me. And that's also why Jefferson's at 4th. They just have to prove next year that they're here to stay, and this isn't just one pop-up year and they're going to fall back down. And getting into some news now, the NHL is starting their 56-game season on January 13th. And let me preface what I'm about to say by saying that I am excited for this season, and I am happy that they were able to figure it out. But the NHL had a golden opportunity there in the summer where sports were just starting to come back. They had a chance to take center stage and be the lone league in play ahead of the NBA, ahead of MLS, and ahead of the MLB, but they blew it. They did the same thing again with this upcoming season. The NBA is gearing up to start their season with preseason games happening this weekend, while the NHL is barely getting ready to start play. The NHL and Gary Bettman's failure to market their sport is baffling. It shouldn't be that difficult, seeing that hockey is such an engaging sport, but they're making it seem impossible, and that just does not sit well with me, because I love hockey and I want more people to love the sport like I do. But I mean, the owners and Gary Bettman just are terrible at that.
And as someone from New England, I've never actually really got into hockey simply because of how difficult it is to watch. And in the sense, I mean that they don't promote it enough in New England. Like compared to the Celtics are plastered everywhere. When you go to the Garden, you don't see a lot of, hockey stuff. Maybe inside the stores, sure. And this is someone that's been in multiple Celtics games. They sell their merchandise, sure, but they don't promote it at all. There's hardly ever any NHL commercials when we get NBA and NFL commercials all the time. It is like I want to get into it, and part of the reason that a lot of people like hockey is because of the Olympics as well, and that helps people get into the sport, at least in the U.S. But it's just so difficult to watch, mainly because I don't know where to watch it, which is a big problem. Because if I could get into the sport, I would, but I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not like you're in Arizona with a team that has no fans, or Florida or anything. Boston is a very good team.
Exactly.
And the NHL just sucks at marketing their sport.
Yep.
That being said, I did not think we were going to talk about soccer at all today or on the show in general. But last night, the Minnesota United played in the Western Conference Finals. They blew a 2-0 lead to the Seattle Sounders, ending their hopes of competing for a championship. A lack of defensive substitutions there at the end really hurt them, allowing Seattle to score 2 goals late in the game, one at 89 minutes and one in stoppage time. Just the pain of sports in the state is real, and I hate it. I want teams to do good. That was their chance, and they blew it.
Sounds accurate. So shifting over to basketball, James Harden is now on holdout, and holdout doesn't seem like it'll end anytime soon. The Rockets head coach Steven Silas said Tuesday that there's no timetable for his return. With Westbrook now in Washington and a new coach in Houston, it feels like they're going to have a hard time getting Harden back on the court without giving him what he wants, which will really affect their season. And I mean, he's one of the best guards in the NBA. I mean, he's an absolute terrible player on defense, in my opinion. I think he led the NBA last year in steals, which was kind of surprising, but they're a completely different team without him on the court, and that's definitely going to deeply affect him. In some relatively breaking news on Instagram and Twitter, Des Bryant announced that he is going to quit the NFL season after testing positive for COVID-19 right during warmups prior to the game tonight between the Cowboys and the Ravens. And of course, this is Des's revenge game against them. He's missed two of them, previously tearing his Achilles right before they played when he summoned the Saints, and this year when he tested positive. So it's kind of unfortunate for Dez, but he just came off of the practice squad, I believe, not too long ago. But yeah, we'll just have to wait quite a long time before we see Des Bryant really take the field and get involved in an offense on an NFL team.
And we are recording this Tuesday night, so that's why you're hearing all these references.
Yes, of course. And then one other thing, of course, being Jalen Hurts is now the starter for the Philadelphia Eagles, which honestly comes as quite a shocker. I never really thought that Doug Peterson would choose to bench Carson Wentz after paying him the money that he did, but now he's out of there, it seems. There's a quarterback controversy in Philly. He took over for Wentz in Philly's loss to Green Bay last week, even though they made it a relatively close game in the end, going 5 for 12 with 109 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. He will face a tougher challenge this week against the Saints defense, which would reduce this already mediocre numbers he had last week. And they did make a game out of it at one point in the fourth quarter, but they just fell short, like the Eagles always do. It's the NFC least, to be honest with you.
And sticking with football here, but switching to the college game, Ohio State's game against Michigan was canceled due to Michigan's COVID cases, which, with the current rules in the Big Ten, that disqualifies Ohio State from the Big Ten championship game. Now, that could change because Ohio State is the Big Ten's best team by far, but this drastically impacts the playoffs. Now, the decision has to be made on whether or not the CFP committee lets Ohio State into the playoffs. If they don't play that Big Ten championship game and say Florida wins the SEC championship, they might have to take a serious look at letting Florida in over Ohio State at that point. Moving on to baseball, the Twins have rescinded their one-year deal offered to Nelson Cruz. Cruz is reportedly waiting for a decision on whether or not there will be a universal DH this upcoming season. If there isn't, that would narrow his options down to just AL teams and make it far more likely that he re-signs with the Twins.
In other news, the White Sox acquired pitchers Lance Lynn from the Texas Rangers in exchange for two pitching prospects. They also re-signed Adam Eaton to a one-year deal. Lynn should bolster Chicago's rotation and continue their newfound success, making them even bigger threats in the Central than they were before. Staying in the Central, Carlos Santana left Cleveland in free agency and signed a 2-year deal with Kansas City.
All right, wrapping that up. Let's finish the show here with our weekly pick segment. The bolder, the better. We're each going to give 3 game picks as well as 2 hopefully hot takes. I'll start us off here. I'm taking Cleveland +1 at home against Baltimore. I think the Browns should be favored in this game. They've been by far the better team this year, and they're at home. Baker Mayfield proved last week that he can sling it. Plus, they have the best backfield in the NFL with Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. Give me the Browns and the point.
My first pick is I have the Colts -4 versus the Raiders. Now, everyone saw the Raiders game last week against the Jets. Well, unless you didn't, and I don't blame you. It was an absolute garbage festival. It was terrible. It was absolutely god awful. Some of the worst football I've ever seen played. They lost their defensive coordinator over, as a matter of fact, for running a cover 0 8-man blitz, which was the dumbest call I think I have ever seen by any play caller in the history of sports. Point is, I believe the Colts are a far better team than the Raiders, and the Raiders almost lost to the Jets if the Jets hadn't been purposely tanking. The Colts have Phillip Rivers, who's playing mediocre football at best. They have a solid backfield and Nyheim Hines and Jonathan Taylor. I think they have a solid wide receiver in T.Y. Hilton. And I just think they have one of the best defenses in football right now. So I think that the Colts are better than the Raiders. And of course, the Raiders lost to the Patriots, and the Patriots suck. So I have the Colts beating the Raiders -4.5.
And touching on that Greg Williams thing there, I don't know why they fired him. He saved their season. If they lost there, they might have lost that Trevor Lawrence pick. Not a
Go
great
ahead.
way to repay your MVP of that game.
You're not
Anyways,
wrong.
My next pick is going to be Houston -2 in Chicago. The Bears imploded last week, blowing a lead to the Darrell Bevel-led Lions. The Texans almost beat one of the better teams in the league, that being the Colts. And had Watson not fumbled in the red zone, they probably would have beaten the Colts. I like the Texans minus the 2 points.
Okay, this one's for my Steelers fans out there. I have the Bills obliterating you. Well, not really. My +2 versus y'all. Steelers fans, you lost to a team without a name. How do you feel? Worst 11-0 team I've ever seen in NFL history. You guys suck. You, how did you lose to a team with no name and Alex Smith, who has a numb leg at quarterback? That's just embarrassing. I hate to see, Juju Smith-Schuster and Chase Claypool doing dances on the field right before you lost. So, just going to point that out there. Out of spite, I picked the Bills +2 versus the Steelers.
And my last game pick for this week is going to be New Orleans -7 at Philly. The Eagles stink, to put it bluntly. The Saints have a better defense than Green Bay and only a slightly worse offense than the Packers, and they beat the Eagles by 14 last week. I think the Saints win, and they cover the 7 points easily.
My final pick is for my Cowboys beating the Bengals -3.5, or excuse me, -3. To start it off, I just think that the Cowboys have the better roster. The Bengals suck, of course. They have no offensive line. You might as well be playing without the offensive line because their quarterbacks manage to get sacked on every single play. The Cowboys, their defense is, not great. They're improving, I'd say, a little bit. Before they lost their treasured quarterback, they had one of the most explosive offenses in the league. Tony Pollard is a great running back. I'm going to skip on Zeke because he's terrible right now. He has one 20-yard rush this season, but, Tony Pollard is the better player. I think that the Bengals are so banged up that they just don't have the players to win. Give me the Cowboys -3.
And to start off the predictions here, I'm saying that Marcus Sherrills will be on the Vikings roster by Christmas. As we said before, special teams seem to be getting worse and worse every week for the Vikings. KJ Osborne had another fumble on a punt return this past week, and the Vikings need something to stop the bleeding there, especially if they want to make that playoff push.
The more and more I think about it, the less and less I like this take. But I say that Adam Gase is fired by next Tuesday. Jets fans, I don't know if this is good news or bad news for y'all. Adam Gase is obviously one of the worst coaches I have ever seen. I'm shocked that they fired Greg Williams first, considering that Adam Gase is the one that hired the man. Gase is, of course, ruining Sam Darnold's potential, even though he doesn't really have too much. Sorry, Sam Darnold, I think you're a great person, but football might not be for you. Point is, the Jets are just absolutely god-awful. And, of course, they want Trevor Lawrence. I don't want Trevor Lawrence going there. I hate to see his potential get wasted on a crappy team like the Jets in one of the worst divisions at football historically. They're good this year, but I just think that the Jets need to get rid of their head coach at some point. I'm shocked rather that they just haven't got rid of the man yet. He does not deserve to have his position. He's not a good person. I just expect him to be gone next Tuesday.
All right, and my final prediction for the week, Matt, sticking with the coaching theme here, Matt Nagy is going to be fired by next Tuesday after a 7th straight loss, so that's a parlay there. Ryan Pace needs to go. I think that's obvious at this point, and in my opinion, if I did that, Matt Nagy goes with him. I don't know how Nagy still has a job after losing to the Darrell Bevel-led Lions. I'll bring that up again. But he certainly won't have one if they lose to Houston this upcoming week.
I really like that take as much as I like Matt Nagy. I think he's a solid head coach, in my opinion. That's a really unpopular pick, but I think that with the right quarterback, I think that he could have the potential to set up another 12-4 run like he did just a couple years ago. My final pick, Eagles fans, rejoice. I say that Doug Peterson is gone in 2 weeks. Mainly because they can't make up their mind over a quarterback. Of course, we just announced earlier that Jalen Hurts is going to be playing this weekend. I just don't get why Peterson has not lost his job yet. His play calling is atrocious. You have an excellent running back in Boston Scott. Well, maybe not excellent, but a solid guy in Boston Scott. There's potential on that roster, but their drafting has been absolutely god-awful. The Jalen Reagor pick was okay, not great. But J.J. Arcega-Whiteside is absolutely terrible. Why did you pick him?
We have to consider who they passed on here. They passed on
Yes,
Jefferson,
DK
and
Metcalf.
and Jefferson. So their drafting has been absolutely atrocious.
I mean, when Peterson first got there, it wasn't that bad. He kind of helped them out a little bit. He worked out the deal to get Wentz back when Wentz was playing well. But he's lost his touch. I don't know what they're thinking. Their picks have been absolutely terrible recently. So some good news for you Eagles fans. I think Peterson's out of there in 2 weeks.
And with all that, that is going to do it for the show this week. Thank you for listening and have a great rest of your week. Hopefully the Vikings win on Sunday. Hopefully the Wolves start at the preseason strong. And we will be back here on Wednesday.